Back at Chicagoland Speedway, and you still have time to get your picks in for the $1 Million Fan Challenge. You can win up to $1 million, and I'm guessing Jimmie Johnson is going to be in everyone's top 10. He looks good in the early portion of this race. Let's go through the field. Leading us off, Matt Yoakum.
Tons of motivation tonight for Jimmie Johnson and Chad Canals with the 48 team. 104 racetracks. They've never scored a cup victory here at Chicago. Yarding the competition now, he says the car much better rolling through the center and a lot better on exit. But it definitely was a handful early on racing the one of Jimmy McMurray, who now says his car has gone to the tight side. He's trying to change up his line to help the balance of his race car, but he has lost a little bit of distance to Johnson, Ralph.
Well, Martin Truex is running in third right now in car 56. He was really good in that first run. Right now, he's struggling a little bit in turns 3 and 4. Problem is, he can't get the gas all the way down as he's working his way to turns 3 and 4, Phil.
Ralph, remember we talked about the 0-0 of David Rudin being a little bit too tight, even tighter than he was the first run. He has the 5th best average finish in the last 10 races to move up to 17th in points. Now, as we go back to the next guy, the 16 of Greg Biffle, he's reporting that he's pushing the right front tire off the car. You see him move up to the top of the racetrack. Comes in here 10th in points. Extremely optimistic about his chances, Marty, for a great run tonight.
Well, Phil, Jeff Gordon driving a brand new race car this weekend. The way they want to head to build race cars for the chase. He loves the way the front end turns, and he just radioed to Steve Letarte. You're never going to hear me say this again. We have way too much front downforce on this car. I can't run the bottom. Car's way too loose on exit, Matt.
Jason Hedlowski, Carl Edwards spotter, has been telling him the different lines that Jimmie Johnson and Jimmy McMurray have been running. Right now, he's soldiering on back in 7th. His car better on this run than the first. The track bar adjustment has helped, but it's still a tick tight on entry. Meanwhile, Tony Stewart making his way back up to the lead area of the race, currently in 8th. What they're going to do on their next stop so they don't have an issue again on pit road, they're going to change the tape on pit road route and have Stewart pit closer to the wall on their next stop.
Well, Matt, you always got to find a way to keep the guys behind you, and that's what Juan Pablo Montoya is trying to do right now. His car is a little too tight, so the crew is working with him on the air, not the air pressure in the tires, but the air around him, teaching him how to use the air to keep the air off of the guy behind him to make it tougher for the car behind him to get around him. The car behind him right now, closing in, is Clint Boyer in the number 33. He just moved himself inside the top 10. Early on, Marty, that car was loose on throttle. Now it's gotten tight.
Well, for Jeff Burton, they've kind of gone backwards with his 31 car. He did take off pretty quick on the initial run, loose the last run. What they did is they took out a quarter pound of air pressure from all the tires, trying to give them more overall grip. It didn't work. Burton said the car much worse. In fact, it made it looser. Larry?
Yeah, quite a bit of parity with Richard Petty Motorsports right now here early in the race. Casey Kane in the 9 is in 11th. Paul Menard in the 98 is 13th. A.J. Allmendinger in the 43 is 14th. And Elliott Sadler, who led some laps at Daytona in that 19 car, 16th. A lot happening in the 19 camp this week. A little bit of a crew chief change. Wally Rogers out. Todd Parrott moved over from Roush Fenway to look after this car. Todd and Elliott Sadler won races together at Robert Yates Racing, but the biggest thing, it was reported this week, Elliott Sadler will not be returning to Richard Petty Motorsports in 2011, Adam.
And Larry, plenty of motivation for them tonight. The Children's Miracle Network on his car. If Elliott wins, he gets $1 million for the Children's Miracle Network. Now, here's an interesting group of cars. Dale Earnhardt Jr. running in the 22nd position. Sam Hornish Jr., Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick. We talked about drivers starting deep in the field, and Kyle, these guys still have some work to do.
Yeah, and this is really a little bit surprising because these guys started deep in the field. They caught a caution. They were able to go in and make an adjustment, and guess what? They're still deep in the field. They're not making the progress. We saw Tony Stewart. These guys are 22nd, 23rd. Right along through there. We saw Tony Stewart start 17th, and he's worked his way back up to 8th right now. These guys can't move. whatever adjustment they made was not a big enough swing at it, was not the right thing.
Yeah.
So
and the 2 car there too, he's been stuck back there the whole race. He hasn't made any ground up.
And this is incredibly surprising for the 2 because these guys have been hot over the last month and a half. So ever since we ran the All-Star race, these guys have been on a streak. Everywhere they go, they're a leader. They're a top 5 car. So these guys made adjustments and they've worked on it, but they've not made any progress.
But if this track does cool down, things can still come these guys' way if it cools down.
The racetrack comes to them instead of them having to go to the racetrack. And we saw that happen with Harvick over at Charlotte. Wasn't even in a race the first part of the race when the sun was out. As soon as it got cloudy or as soon as the sun went down, he goes to the front and has another great top 5 run.
It has been his motto all season long, talking about Harvick being able to drive through the field. If they get to the front, they're likely going to be racing with Jimmy Johnson. He's had no issues tonight, and he continues to lead.
NASCAR Sprint Cup Racing from Chicago on TNT is brought to you by Progressive, making it easier to buy car insurance. By Coca-Cola, open a Coke and enjoy the race. By Sprint, proud sponsor of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. By Burger King, who reminds you to have it your way. And by Toyota.
50 miles south of downtown Chicago, the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series racing for the 19th time in 2010. Jimmy Johnson, the race leader, and the man moving behind him, Juan Pablo Montoya. While we were at break, he was able to drive around Tony Stewart and go to the 8th position, and now he's up to 7th as he squeezes around Greg Biffle.
Yeah, I mean, and he went by the 14 car just a lap ago and left them. So he's found something on the racetrack that is working for him.
82 of 267 laps complete. And Larry, I'm sure these crew chiefs starting to think about strategy. What are you looking at?
Well, I think they're mainly starting to think about changes. Now, I looked at the weather today, and it's supposed to cool down about 15 degrees from the start of this 400-mile race to the end. Now, this is the radiator opening where air flows through here to get to the radiator to cool the fins where the water flows through the radiator. Now, as the ambient temperature cools down, you don't need as much airflow through here. So what these guys may do is add tape to this. Now, one thing you can do is add tape just like this. What that will do, that helps the straightaway speed. It puts less airflow through this area, but the biggest thing it'll help it do, it helps the front downforce, the pressure on the nose of the car. Now, the reason I did it here on the left side and left side only, this is the corner you want to plant. If you get this corner here nailed down, it really helps that car to turn through these 18 degrees of banking.
Thank you, Larry. And that splitter, a big subject of conversation here during the practice sessions yesterday as teams tried to get their cars dialed in. And as rough as this racetrack has gotten, it's pretty easy to get that splitter roughed up because you do bounce around quite a bit here.
And they've got them right down on the racetrack. You can especially see it when they go through the corners. They're basically dragging through the corners.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. jumped into the top 12 in points with that 4th place finish last week at Daytona. Not been great for him here tonight. He's 22nd, trying to get around Ryan Newman.
And he's trying a lot of places on the racetrack. You see Newman, and you see the 88, and you see the 29 of Kevin Harvick. These guys have kind of been hung together with magnets or whatever ever since they dropped the green flag.
And you saw the 39 there. When the 88 was on the high side, Newman's car looks pretty loose. He was down there in the middle of 1 and 2. And see it again? Yeah. That car is loose right there. So the 39 is going to be, he's going to be slipping back. He's wanting some grip there. But Junior, you look on the steering wheel, he's fairly comfortable. He's got the, he's not jacking with the wheel. If you remember how Carl Edwards was really going way to the right, to the left, he's tugging on it, but he's not working it. The car is working fairly good for Junior right there.
And you hear him pick up the throttle, and it goes pretty good. Phil?
Yeah, Dale Jr. was reporting that his car is really bad right now. He said it's hopping and popping all over the track. He said it's really, really loose up off the corner, is what he's told Lance McGrew.
Well, it sure doesn't look it by the steering wheel. I mean, he hasn't turned that wheel to the right once.
Yeah, by the steering wheel and by the throttle. You can hear the throttle there. He feathers back into it pretty good and seems to be in the gas pretty hard coming up off.
Jimmy Johnson's led every lap tonight, 86 complete. We'll see his drivers on pit road for green flag stops when we return.